This story is about a young worker who falls in love with the woman he works for. She is much older than him and has been married for many years, but her husband is always busy with his job and doesn't pay attention to her. The movie starts at a house near the beach where a man named Ted lives with his wife Marion and their young daughter Ruth. On the walls of their house are framed pictures of two boys, Ted and Marion's sons, who died in a car accident several years ago. Marion, their mother, still feels very sad about losing her sons and has been unhappy ever since. She can't get over what happened to them. One day, Ruth is walking through the house when she sees the pictures on the wall. She asks her father about them, but Ted tells her not to think about those photos. He explains they are pictures of her dead brothers. Ruth says she believes her brothers are still alive, but her father tells her it's time to stop thinking about them. Ted writes children's books and draws pictures for a living. He's always busy with his work, so he hired a woman named Alice to take care of Ruth. Ruth is very curious and often looks at the photos in the hallway, believing that someday her brothers will come back to her. One day, Ted asks his wife Marion to go out with him, but Marion feels so sad that she doesn't even answer him. Later that night, while Ted is sleeping, Ruth comes to him and says she heard voices. She thinks her brothers were calling her. Ted takes her to the hallway to help her understand the truth. He shows her the pictures again and gently comforts her, then brings her back to bed. While putting her to sleep, he tells her stories about her brothers. After Ruth falls asleep, Ted goes back to writing his book. The next morning, Marion goes out to pick up a young man named Eddie. She meets him and they talk, getting to know each other. Through their conversation, we learn that Ted quickly hired Eddie as his helper. Eddie also mentions that he will drive for Ted too, because Ted's driver's license was taken away for drinking alcohol. So Ted had no choice but to hire Eddie. Eddie hopes to learn about writing while staying there. Marion brings Eddie to Ted's house and leaves. When Eddie arrives, he meets Ted, who then introduces him to a doctor friend named Rumi. Later, when they go inside the house, Eddie tells Ted that he's already read many of Ted's books, and his favorite is called The Door in the Floor. Eddie shares that he loves writing too, and wants to learn how to write books from Ted. Ted starts opening up to Eddie and tells him that he's not happy with his wife Marion. That's why he stays here by the beach, and he's rented another house in town for Marion to live in by herself. After that, Ted explains what Eddie's job will be. He tells him that he'll need to travel back and forth to town often to see his wife, and that the job might be difficult. When Eddie meets Alice, she starts asking questions about him. Eddie explains who he is and why he's working there. Alice then leaves with Ruth. The next morning, Ted is seen with a woman who is there to make him happy. Ted, already tempted, starts drinking and looks at her with desire. Meanwhile, Eddie sees Ruth standing in front of the photograph, talking to it as if having a conversation, but he says nothing about it. That night, Eddie goes to see a movie with Marion. During the movie, he keeps looking at her, though Marion doesn't know he's watching her with loving eyes. After the movie, when they leave the theater, Marion asks Eddie how he liked the film, but Eddie, lost in thinking about her, doesn't have much to say. As they return home, it's already morning. Marion says she enjoyed watching the movie with Eddie and invites him to dinner. Eddie happily agrees. During dinner, the two seem to enjoy being together. Eddie starts to feel strange feelings toward Marion. One day while Marion is walking on the beach, Eddie quietly watches her from far away. It's as if Eddie is being pulled toward her. In the house, he secretly looks at Marion's clothes, but just then, Marion walks in and catches him. Feeling embarrassed, Eddie says he's sorry. Marion gently tells him that at his age, such feelings are normal and nothing to be ashamed of. She says she's actually happy that someone thinks about her that way. They start to talk more, discussing different things, including love. Slowly, they seem to grow closer to each other. Now Ted and Marion have started sleeping in different places. At night, Marion sleeps in the beach house while Ted goes to the rented house in town. Eddie also starts sleeping at Marion's house, and they meet more often. One evening, Marion and Eddie go out for dinner again. During dinner, Marion tells Eddie that he's a good person for his age. Hearing this, Eddie tries to make Marion laugh by telling her a joke, but she doesn't laugh. Then Marion playfully asks if Eddie has a relationship with Alice. She's clearly trying to find out who Eddie actually likes, but from Eddie's answer, she figures out that he doesn't have a girlfriend. Playfully, Marion says, "Then why don't you ask Alice out on a date?" But Eddie says she's not like him. Marion tells him that Alice isn't a good woman, and that she doesn't take proper care of her daughter Ruth. Marion still loves her husband, but she hasn't been able to get over the death of her sons. Because of that, she's also been unable to truly love her daughter Ruth. After saying this, she shows Eddie the pictures of her sons in the hallway. It's nighttime and they both go to their rooms to sleep. But Eddie can't fall asleep. His mind is filled with thoughts of Marion. Suddenly, Marion walks into Eddie's room. Her mood seems different, romantic. She asks Eddie, "Have you ever been in a relationship with someone?" Marion looked like she was trying to attract Eddie. It was as if she was burning with want. She spoke sweetly, lovingly, and then she began to take off her clothes. Eddie didn't want to miss the moment. He already understood what was in Marion's heart. They got close. That night, they made love. It was the first time in years that Marion had truly felt loved. Afterward, Eddie told her how good it felt to be with her. The next morning, the two of them went out for a walk on the beach. Ted noticed them walking together, but wasn't completely sure something was happening between them. Ted, always caught up in his own work, didn't have the time or energy to think about such things. He was busy working on his next book. Later, at a party with Ted, Eddie noticed that Ted had a habit of flirting with young women. It became clear to Eddie why Ted didn't love Marion. On their way home, Ted said to Eddie, "I saw Marion smiling today after a long time." Eddie didn't respond, but Ted was starting to think that Marion might be in love with Eddie. Eddie, however, played it smart and avoided Ted's suspicions. The love between Eddie and Marion continued to grow. They spent more and more time together, but Eddie also made sure to do his helper duties properly. He didn't want Ted to find out about the affair. Eddie even played tennis with Ted and made sure to lose. He didn't want to make Ted feel threatened or suspicious. The next morning, as Eddie was going somewhere with Ted, Ted confronted him about his relationship with Marion. Ted said, "I want to divorce Marion, but I need your help. I want custody of my daughter Ruth." Back at home, Eddie tells Marion that Ted isn't a good man. But Marion defends him, saying that Ted is actually a good father and takes good care of Ruth. She says his only problem is his obsession with painting, which she absolutely hates. She explains that in the early days of their marriage, Ted used to paint portraits of her, and that made her deeply uncomfortable. Later that night, when Eddie and Marion are together, Eddie brings up her sons. The moment he asks, Marion becomes emotional, and memories of her dead sons overwhelm her. She starts crying. That night, Eddie is showing Ruth all the photographs. Ruth asks if she can take one picture to her room. Marion agrees, but Ruth accidentally drops the picture, and a piece of broken glass cuts her finger. Eddie and Marion quickly take her to the doctor. When Ted finds out, he gets very angry at Eddie for giving Ruth the photo. He scolds Eddie, saying it was Marion's job, not his. That night, Ruth has another scary dream and wakes up crying. Ted feels bad and tries hard to comfort her, but nothing works. Then Marion comes in and calms Ruth down right away. Seeing this, Ted realizes that after their divorce, Ruth should stay with Marion because she's truly happy with her. The next day, Marion suddenly starts crying again. Memories of her son flood back. Eddie tries to calm her down, but Marion tells him she's planning to leave soon, and this time she won't come back. That same day, Ted asks Eddie to deliver all his paintings to a woman named Evelyn's house. He's done with her now and wants to move on. When Eddie arrives at Evelyn's house, she gets angry. She had invited Ted over, but he never showed up. She tells Eddie that Ted must come see her on Friday. Then, in frustration, Evelyn accidentally locks herself out of the house. Eddie ends up breaking one of her windows to get back inside. That evening, Marion tells Eddie, "On Friday, when you drop Ted off at Evelyn's house, don't bring him back." She says, "If Ted has to walk home alone, it'll take him longer. And during that time, I'll take all the boys' pictures and leave this place for good." The next day, Eddie drives Ted to Evelyn's house. Evelyn is furious. She tears up all the paintings Ted had sent her. Eddie drops Ted off and drives back home. Marion then sends Ruth with Eddie to the doctor to get her stitches removed. Marion says, "If Ruth is here, I won't be able to leave." Meanwhile, Evelyn follows Ted in her car. Ted barely escapes by running down to the beach. After Ruth's stitches are removed, Eddie stops by the photo shop to pick up a picture that had been broken earlier. Marion had sent it in for repair. Eddie asks for the picture, knowing Ruth will be angry if she returns home and doesn't find either her mother or the photo. But the manager refuses to give Eddie the picture, so Eddie writes a letter explaining everything. He tells the manager the whole story, including the affair between him and Marion. After reading the letter, the manager comes out from the back, clearly moved by the story. The shopkeeper finally gives Eddie the photo. Meanwhile, Ted rushes to a bookstore where he has many fans. He starts signing autographs for them. There, his eyes catch two young women who are huge fans of his. He asks them if they can drop him off at his home. Instead, the girls take him to their own house first, where he changes his clothes. After that, Ted tells the girls and their mother that he wants to paint them, and they happily agree. With their help, Ted returns home quickly. As he arrives, he sees Marion leaving. He turns to look at her, but says nothing. Marion quietly walks away, this time forever, moving to New York. Sometime later, Eddie returns with Ruth. Ted is furious and slaps Eddie, even though it wasn't Eddie's fault. Angry, Eddie punches Ted back, something Marion had told him to do if Ted ever tried to hurt him. Eddie tells Ted that Marion is gone for good, and that she took all the pictures of their sons with her. Ted now has no photographs left of his boys. Shocked and heartbroken, Ted fires Eddie and tells him to leave immediately. After Marion leaves, handling Ruth becomes very difficult. Even the babysitter Alice ends up quitting. Ted becomes deeply saddened and later opens up to Eddie about the tragic accident that took their sons' lives. He explains that they were out one night, Marion, Ted, and their two sons, all drunk. The younger son, who was inexperienced at driving, was behind the wheel. Snow had built up on the headlights and taillights, but Ted had forgotten to clear it. Because of poor visibility, their car hit a truck on the highway. Both sons died in the crash. Ted says they had Ruth afterward, hoping it would ease the pain, but it didn't help. Eddie feels terrible hearing this, but he still can't understand how a mother could leave her own daughter behind. The next day, Evelyn's servant comes to meet Ted and tells him that Evelyn has fired him. Hearing this, Ted hires him as his driver and then hires his wife to be Ruth's cook and babysitter. After that, Eddie says goodbye to Ted and leaves to go back home. Ted's new driver and his wife begin taking good care of Ruth. And with that, the film comes to an end.